Hi, it's Lee from colouringqueen.net, and I thought we'd have a colouring story today. I'm colouring a picture by Maria Trolle for my Maria in May colour along, and I hope you're all having a good day today. I've been busy planting more bulbs in the garden, but I've now run out of garden space and I still have more bulbs to plant. So I need to find somewhere to put some garden pots for the rest of the bulbs before it gets too late to plant them. In case you're wondering, Millie and Buddy are sleeping, and since they've become best friends, they've both kind of deserted me in the colouring cave, unless I'm trying to do something and then they get in a position and box me in. But as well as gardening, I've been throwing out a lot of stuff, and I guess in my mad search for my qualifications that I told you about last time, I found a lot of stuff that I can live without or it's been broken. So rather than keep it and save it for later like a little hoarder, I'm madly tossing it out like a Maria Kondo fan. So I'm filling up the garbage bin all the time. So I can't wait until everything is all organised and in its place. So usually I have a story that goes with the picture that I'm colouring, but today I don't. So I had to rack my brains for an interesting story to tell you. And I guess it may not be interesting to you, but I've always been fascinated by it, but I fascinate easily. So today I thought I would tell you about a case involving a picture. Actually, it's a photograph and a very prominent law firm in Australia and why they got sued. So it's about a picture, but it's probably not what you're thinking. So Slater and Gordon are a very well respected law firm in Australia. They have a number of offices around the country and they have a team of great lawyers. They do a lot of class action type work. They do negligence compensation work and even other general work, and they also do defamation work as well. So sometime in 1999, Slater and Gordon decided to create a booklet that was designed to reassure medical practitioners about how they deal with malpractice claims and to try and allay fears that there wasn't going to be this huge growth in medical negligence claims like what our friends across the pond in the US experience. That's not like the situation in Australia. So the booklet was for medical negligence or malpractice, and it showcased the services that they could offer to people in the state of Victoria and to allay the fears of medical practitioners and surgeons especially. So they created the booklet and it featured two surgeons on the cover in full scrubs. So they had a mask on, their hat, their full scrubs. So they didn't pay for models to play the part of the surgeons, but rather they used a picture that was from the Age newspaper's pictorial library, and they didn't get the consent of the applicants and they didn't actually know about it until later. And the actual photograph was of two cardiothoracic surgeons conducting surgery in Australia. And it was actually a widely distributed photo because it was from the first time that this particular type of surgery had been done in Australia. But I'll tell you more about that later. Now, it is not what you think. I know some of you are thinking that this is all about using an unauthorised picture and that it's a copyright case. It's not. So, just want to allay that right now. This is why it's so interesting. Well, it's so interesting to me. So during May and June in 1999, the firm sent out a letter by prepaid post to 8,500 odd medical practitioners in Victoria. And with the letter, there were also two booklets, and one featured the two surgeons on the cover. And this is what the letter said. Dear Dr. So-and-so, at Slater and Gordon, we specialise in representing injured Victorians. And for my friends across the pond, Victoria is a state of Australia. So back to the letter, we recognise that in doing so, we may cause a degree of disruption in your life by requesting medical reports or by asking you to give evidence in court. We are committed to minimising this disruption and thus have prepared a guide to report writing and court appearances. The booklet is designed to provide information about what may be asked of you when a patient is pursuing a claim for compensation arising out of an injury. We also understand the medical profession's concern about the perceived growth of medical negligence litigation, and it's for this reason that we've prepared a second booklet. We hope that the more controversial medical malpractice guide will both clarify some of the issues surrounding medical negligence actions and detail our approach to these claims. We've taken care to make these publications relevant to you and have sought to provide a balanced view. In doing so, we have incorporated amendments and comment offered by a senior official of a medical defence organisation. If you wish to discuss any of these issues outlined in these booklets, or you'd like more copies, please contact me on blah blah blah. So the cover of the booklet at issue featured the photograph of a surgeon standing in a witness box, holding the Bible in his right hand, and there was a caption on it that said, "What do they want from me now?" And the booklet, which was stated to be published by Slater and Gordon, provided information for treating doctors on report preparation and court appearances. The second booklet, the one that's at issue, was called the Medical Malpractice Booklet, and it was in the same format, except the photograph on the cover was of the two surgeons, and they were conducting cardiothoracic surgery on a patient. And in the background, a fully robed barrister in his wig and gown was superimposed at the head of the operating bed, scrutinising the surgery. I have to laugh at that. The captions in respect of the photograph said medical malpractice claims, and below the photograph it said a litigation explosion ? So the author of the letter was actually a partner of Slater and Gordon, and he was also responsible for preparing the booklets. He took a lot of care to make sure that the text of the booklets was approved by the chairman of the Medical Indemnity Protection Society, because he wanted to be satisfied that the booklets weren't offensive to doctors and they were conveyed in an appropriate manner. The picture that was used on the cover wasn't approved by the Medical Indemnity Protection Society. I don't think they were asked about the photograph or the graphics accompanying it. And the barrister that was superimposed on this picture was an actor, and he was dressed in a barrister's wig and gown. So it seems it would have been easier just to pay models for this photo shoot, because the graphic artist had to disguise the identity of the two surgeons to avoid giving any offence. And as a result, the graphic wizardry made the following alterations. The Dr. Nixon on the left, he had some red marks on his headgear that were removed. His beard was removed and it was replaced with some skin. And the doctor on the right, Dr. Ellis, his surgical cap was altered from behind the ear to cover the top of the ear. His sideburns were removed, his eyebrows were removed, his eyelashes were altered, and the texture and the colour of the skin on the face was altered. The hairline on the back of the neck was altered, and his earlobe was reshaped. So, graphic surgery. So all this technique wizardry proved useless though, because despite the graphic alterations, the full surgical gowns and the masks, people, more importantly, other doctors out of those 8,500 on that mailing list recognised them from the surgery being performed and the original picture that had been distributed when it was first taken. So one of the doctors, Ian Nixon, he was a senior surgeon. He'd spent time overseas at the Johns Hopkins Clinic in Baltimore. He was an eminent, or still is, eminent cardiothoracic surgery, employed at a number of hospitals and in private practice. He actually spent 3 weeks in Cleveland in the US, observing a procedure called minimal invasive valve surgery, and this was a new whiz-bang technique. And when he came back, he brought this technique to Australia, and it was a much more advanced method of replacing heart valves on patients, making a small incision rather than a large incision. And when he came back, his assistant for this surgery that was being performed for the first time in Australia was Dr. Ellis, and it created a lot of publicity. There were articles in the Herald newspaper in Australia and The Age, which of course is where that picture came from that was used on the cover of the booklet. And it was described as a major breakthrough, and photographs of them were featured on a number of hospital financial reports, and it was a very big thing at the time. The other doctor, Dr. Ellis, is a skilled surgical assistant as well. He'd completed his residency at the Royal Melbourne Hospital. He'd been in private practice, and he was the assistant for Dr. Nixon, performing the cardiothoracic surgery for about 5 years at the time of this booklet. And he was described as being a second pair of eyes, second pair of hands, and a second brain to supplement what the surgeon is doing, and a vital part of the surgical team. Both doctors had built up quite a reputation by the time this booklet was published for this minimally invasive valve surgery, and neither doctor knew that their picture was going to be used on this booklet. So you can imagine the shock that Dr. Nixon felt when he's sitting in his private rooms in Fitzroy in Melbourne, opens up his mail and finds this booklet with his picture on it and Dr. Ellis. And the booklet is about malpractice. He felt threatened, not only in a personal perspective, but also professionally, and that he felt that it was implied that he had done something wrong, that he had committed malpractice because his picture is on this booklet. So the thing is, the photograph on a booklet would make it look like that these two eminently professional doctors that had brought this great way of doing minimally invasive surgery to Australia had been negligent in some way. And obviously this is professionally damaging if other people will find out about it, and it might influence them in some way. And they both immediately felt that this would adversely affect them. Now, Dr. Ellis wasn't on this mailing list, but people were rushing to tell him about it. His anaesthetist told him about it, and they felt that because they were on about it, there must have been something wrong with that surgery. Other people, of course, started to notice, medical staff, nursing staff at the hospitals that they worked at, including hospital administrators. And one person even sort of took steps to change his practice so that he wouldn't rely on Dr. Nixon so much for this particular type of surgery. So the brochure was scattered around operating theatres, in other hospitals, and it was the cover of the booklet rather than the text that upset both doctors. They immediately consulted their lawyers about what they could do about this booklet circulating with an unauthorised use of their photograph. Now, it's not copyright issue. I know some of you will be thinking that, but as I said before, this is not a copyright issue. So usually when lawyers think of damage to reputation, one of the areas of law that naturally pops up is defamation. But usually when most people think of defamation, they think of words, what people said or wrote, rather than pictures. Could a picture actually defame someone? A picture where the doctors are in fully clothed, like you can barely recognise them, they've been digitally altered? Or can you recognise them? So after consulting with his lawyers, Dr. Nixon's lawyers informed Slater and Gordon on 5th of June that it was a serious libel, and they demanded publication of the booklet cease and desist. And after a bit of argy-bargy, Slater and Gordon agreed not to circulate the existing print run. But the doctors said that the publication of the medical malpractice booklet also brought up another area of law called trade practices law. Now, I'm not really going to tell you about this. Suffice to say that, they were right on that one as well. What I'm going to tell you about is the photograph. So during the course of the trial, because the doctors really wanted this booklet out of circulation, the judge considered the areas of defamation to prove, is this photograph defamatory? And one of the things for defamation is that it has to be an imputation, and this is in Australia, by the way. Laws may be different in your country or state. It has to be an act or condition asserted or attributed to a person. And it has to capture the meaning alleged to have been conveyed by the words rather than the actual words themselves. So if you see two doctors on a malpractice booklet, what would you reasonably think? And in the ordinary meaning, the doctors believed that it was defamatory of them. The booklet meant that it was associated with that they've done something that constitutes malpractice. But really, it's what other people think when we're defamed. What does the general public think? Or in this case, what do all the other people on the mailing list think? And after, quite some thought, the judge believed that it reinforces the existence of a legal claim against the doctors in the photograph, meaning it looks like that they have been in some way guilty of medical negligence. But did anyone actually identify the doctors from the pictures? I mean, they had full scrubs on, masks, cover-ups, you name it. So, I mean, really not much of them was really available. And the thing is that people did. Medical profession actually recognised them from that type of surgery that they were doing that was shown in the picture. But not only that, there was a unique factor about Dr. Nixon. His posture and his physique made him very clearly identifiable. And so most people that were called to give evidence, medical professionals, they felt that they must have done something in order to get on top of that booklet cover. They must have done something wrong. So a lot of people managed to identify the surgeons just from their physique and that well-known photograph that had been put out because of their great surgery and the first time it was done in Australia. And so even though Slater and Gordon never intended to defame or identify the doctors, they'd taken great efforts to graphically make some changes to their facial appearance so they couldn't be recognised, people still did recognise them, and they recognised that surgery. And so even though they tried, the defamation actually occurred. So the only question left is how much. And after going through it all, the judge awarded damages of $200,000 for Dr. Nixon, and he was the one that could be recognised just by his physique and his posture, and $100,000 for Dr. Ellis. And they reflected also the difference between the professional standing. Dr. Nixon was the senior surgeon responsible for the operation, and he's likely to bear the brunt, being the senior surgeon, of any loss of business and any damage to his reputation, whereas Dr. Ellis was assisting, so his boss or the main surgeon is more likely to cop more damage to reputation than him. So the judge, in summing up, he sort of commended Slater and Gordon about, creating this lovely little booklet that was designed to help people in medical negligence, but that actually stumbled at its first hurdle. Their endeavour to reassure the medical profession of its commitment to avoiding unfair publicity, unfortunately, really backfired when two members of that profession really suffered from it. So I'd love to know what you think, if you think it's defamatory when you look at a picture. Personally, I think the judge got it right. Right. Because the ordinary person, even though they weren't the standard, it was the doctors on that mailing list were the standard. An ordinary person would assume that if you're on that cover, you've done something wrong, or I think that's what an ordinary person would think, or a reasonable person, because otherwise you would just use paid actors. And the thing is, if they'd used the paid actors like they did with the barrister, they wouldn't have been in this position and in the precedent section of the law books. So I don't know. Maybe next time spend a few bucks on getting the actors in to play the parts just like they did with the barrister. That's all I can say. But I'd love to know what you think, if you think they got it right. Personally, I think the actual damages were a bit low. They also got the legal costs as well, which would take a fair chunk of that. And I actually think, the damages were a bit low, because when you consider loss of income for surgeons, their income is obviously a lot higher, and you really don't know how long sort of the effect of this will go on for, because a lot of people think, oh, well, there's no smoke without fire, and they might not know about the case. They might not know that the doctors sued, and they might see that brochure many years later or hear about it and think that they'd done something wrong. So it's a terrible shame that, two surgeons that brought such a great thing to Australia had to go and sue to protect their reputation. But I guess these things happen. And Slater and Gordon, as I said right at the beginning, they are a really good law firm. They are really good, and you have a partner in charge of creating these booklets. But, I guess he did all the right things, got the text checked with the Medical Indemnity Society, but never got that cover checked, got the actor in for the barrister, got things graphically altered, but, maybe one more thought process, or maybe, I don't know if they had a committee to work on this marketing material, but maybe someone else to have a look at it and sort of pound out any ideas or problems that might be with it. But it goes to show that even, the best law firms can make mistakes with their own publications. So, it's a funny world, isn't it? But I hope you enjoyed that story, and I hope you found it interesting in some ways. So I do have a story planned for next month, and I'd thought about this a long time in advance because it does go with my colour along theme, so I won't be stuck for a story next month. But I like looking back at these old cases and having a think about them. It exercises my brain a bit. All this looking at pictures has made me lose 500 brain cells a day, I'm sure of it. But I love it, I do. I love looking at my colouring books. And the great news is that since I went through all of those things looking for my qualifications a couple of weeks ago, I have found so many colouring books I haven't shown you. It's not funny. So be prepared to see some of those in the future. But until next time, stay safe and happy colouring.